Today, we're diving into a moment in history when a single strip of water, a canal, became the epicenter of a global showdown. A story of old empires, new superpowers, and a bold act of defiance that literally redrew the map of world power. We're talking, of course, about the 1956 Suez Crisis.
I mean, just think about that for a second. How can one man-made ditch in the desert bring two of the world's greatest empires to their knees? It sounds almost impossible, right? But that's exactly what happened. This is the story of how it all went down.
All right, so here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll talk about why this canal was such a big deal. Then, we'll get to the defiant move that kicked everything off. After that, the secret plot to strike back, the moment the real superpowers stepped in, and finally, what the world looked like after the dust settled.
Okay, first up, a strategic waterway. Because you can't really get why this whole thing blew up without understanding the powder keg it was all built on. And that powder keg, well, it was the canal itself.
You know, calling this canal a vital artery is almost an understatement. For Britain and France, it was more like the jugular vein of their economies. Get this, 2/3 of all the oil Europe needed came through this one single waterway. So if you controlled the canal, you basically had your hand on the light switch for Europe's entire industrial machine.
Now, before we go any further, there's one key word we got to get straight: nationalization. It sounds kind of technical, but it's really simple. All it means is a country's government stepping in and saying, hey, this private company or this big asset inside our borders, it's ours now. It belongs to the people. And this one act, well, it's the spark that's about to light the fuse.
Which brings us right to the man at the center of the storm, Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser, and his absolutely defiant move. This is where one man decides to look the old world order right in the eye and challenge it head-on. So, picture it, July 26, 1956. Nasser stands up in front of a massive crowd and drops an absolute bombshell. He announces that the Suez Canal Company is now under Egyptian control. For Britain and France, who were the main shareholders, this wasn't just some business problem. Oh no, this was a direct slap in the face. This was a declaration that the age of colonial dominance was over.
So, how do you think the old empires responded? With calm negotiations? Not a chance. They went with something way more drastic, and that brings us to their secret plan of attack.
So, behind closed doors, a secret alliance starts to form. You've got Britain and France, who are absolutely furious about losing their economic lifeline, and they team up with Israel, a new, powerful country in the region that had its own major issues with Egypt. The three of them got together and plotted to take back the canal by force.
And their plan was, well, it was devious, but it was simple. Step 1, Israel would invade Egypt's Sinai Peninsula, creating a ton of chaos. Step 2, Britain and France would swoop in, acting like peacekeepers, to separate the two sides. And step 3, in the middle of all the confusion, they'd just happen to seize the real prize, the Suez Canal.
The invasion kicks off, and at first, it seems to be going exactly to plan. But the invaders made one gigantic miscalculation. They didn't account for the new giants on the world stage. And this is the pivot point of the whole crisis. The superpowers step in.
And this is where the story gets truly bizarre. On one side, you have the invaders, but who's on the other side opposing them? The United States and the Soviet Union. Yeah, you heard me right. The two greatest enemies of the Cold War were suddenly on the same team. The US was furious that its allies went behind its back, and the Soviets saw a perfect chance to gain influence, even threatening missile strikes on London and Paris. It was a global checkmate.
The pressure was just immense. The United States basically threatened to bankrupt Great Britain. The Soviets were making nuclear threats. The whole world was watching. Caught between a rock and a hard place, Britain, France, and Israel had no choice. They were forced into a deeply humiliating withdrawal.
The fighting itself was over in just a few weeks, but the consequences? Oh, the consequences would echo for decades. Which brings us to our final section, a new world order.
This quote really says it all. The Suez Crisis wasn't just a failed military campaign. It was the exact moment that the torch of global power was visibly passed from one generation of powers to the next. It was the end of an era.
So what's the bottom line here? Well, a few huge things. One, it was now painfully obvious that Britain and France couldn't make a major move on the world stage without America's okay. Two, the Middle East was now officially a central battleground for the Cold War.
And 3, it proved that in the new nuclear age, just having a powerful army wasn't always enough.
And that leaves us with one final big question. In 1956, the global power structure was turned on its head almost overnight. It just goes to show how quickly things can change. So it forces us to ask, in our world today, who really holds that power? And how quickly could it all shift again?